Hello and welcome to Mastering Microsegmentation. Today's webinar is sponsored by TrueFort and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this Democast. Now, before we get to today's great demos and presentations, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that get asked. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, and I'd especially like to call your attention to three PDFs from TrueFort. There's a TrueFort Microsegmentation Solution Brief, a TrueFort Platform Solution Brief, and a TrueFort Platform Overview White Paper. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. And with that, let's get to today's presentation and demo. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. We have Nick Lisa, who's Senior Sales Engineer for TrueFort. Nick, great to have you here. Take it away.
Segmentation, leveraging the TrueFort platform. So to get into it, our modern application environments are under attack. There's a plethora of ways that attackers are going about this. And whether it's physical, virtual, or cloud workloads, they're trying to compromise all of them. So some of the verticals they go through: compromised credentials, living off the land, APTs and supply chain attacks, and insider threats, things like ransomware, spreading through lateral movement, and then finally data exfiltration. How do you protect from all of these different attacks inside of your network where your most critical business applications lie? And the simple answer to that is leveraging something like TrueFort. So what we're doing is taking in that runtime telemetry. That comes from a variety of sources. So whether those workloads are in the cloud, they're virtual machines, or they're actually physical machines, we can leverage all the different operating systems and some type of agent. So whether that be a TrueFort agent or one of our third-party partners like CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, or Armis, we can pull in the data from those workloads, all the things like Windows servers, the different flavors of Linux, and even Kubernetes, all start to flow into a central platform. The first thing that we get is observability. So this observability allows us to create application mappings. So now we can see how are all of the workloads connected in an application basis. Simultaneously, we get real-time querying abilities. So the ability to take all of that custom telemetry that we're ingesting and to be able to query it, run dashboards, and we'll see more of that during the demo of how we create those custom queries. The next piece is using behavioral analytics to create a behavioral profile. So we actually go and learn from your live data what is normal in the environment, and we use that to create a behavioral profile. That behavioral profile then drives our controls. First of which is microsegmentation. So being able to create network policies in that profile that we can then go and push to the host-based firewalls. So now we can do true microsegmentation, leveraging Windows firewall and IP tables on the individual hosts. The next one being service account controls, understanding what all the users in the environment are doing, whether they're interactive users like me and you, or they're service accounts that are supposed to run one specific job. We learn and define what they're supposed to do so we can detect when they deviate from that normal baseline. The next one is workload integrity. So this is where TrueFort can do file integrity monitoring. So we can monitor the files on the workloads to understand if they change in any way. And the last one is workload hardening. So this is CIS reporting on those workloads. All of that bundled into the same platform. And then the last piece is all about response. So the first thing we're going to do is targeted alerting. So we're going to understand when those deviations happen, and we're going to let the team know that there's been a user deviating, there's been a network connection or a process that's deviated from its normal connections or patterns. Automated enforcement. So this is where we can take real-time response actions. Things like ending a network connection, logging a user out of a session, killing a process, or even uninstalling a package that's unauthorized. All of these automated enforcement actions are possible with TrueFort. The last one is the ability to trigger workflows. So we want to integrate with existing tooling in your environment. So if there's some other SOAR platform that you want to leverage to create a workflow, we're glad to integrate there and create that workflow. So what does TrueFort help enable customers to do? The first one, expand value of existing agents. For our customers that already leverage CrowdStrike and SentinelOne or Armis, there's simply nothing to install. We start ingesting the telemetry you're already collecting, and we start to use our platform. Gain clarity for the business. So we can start to map how workloads are used. How are they connecting? What's needed for successful protection in cloud migrations, mergers, and acquisitions? Help control that lateral movement. Prevent that initial compromise of a server, a privileged account, or an application from spreading to the point where it becomes devastating. And what does that timeline look like? We start by discovering and understanding the environment. We profile and baseline. We're using supervised machine learning to define that policy. We review and define that profile, remove any undesired behaviors, and approve the behaviors that we did see. We can alert and refine, so we can review those alerts and iterate on those rules until we're satisfied to the point where we go into enforcement and actually secure your environment. So now that we've seen a quick overview of the platform, we're going to actually go and dive into a demo. So I'm going to hop over into there now. All right, and now we are in the TrueFort platform. So now I'll take you through a demo of how the platform works, and we'll go through a similar flow. We'll look at the visibility, how we can start to map and understand the environment. We'll talk about how we create a behavioral profile. We'll look at the controls, and then we'll wrap it all up with reporting. So starting off with visibility. On day one, TrueFort is going to help you map your workloads to applications. So we're taking in all of those agents, whether they be CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, or TrueFort, and we map them to their business function. So as we can see here, we have multiple applications and we can see how they're interacting with one another. If I highlight one of these apps, we can start to see how the flows are going between them. And as you notice throughout this demo, you may see lines moving and boxes shifting because this is real-time telemetry. So let's go inside of an application here. Once we're inside the application, we can see the individual workloads in the middle here and how they're interacting both internally to the application and outside of the application. We group up these workloads based on their roles. So we know which workloads are load balancers, which are web servers, which are app servers, and which is the database. Then on the left side, we see other nodes that TrueFort already knows about. We've already labeled these in some way, and we're just representing them to you. We're showing you that we're connecting to them. They're outside of the application. So we're seeing some things like DNS servers or NTP servers and file servers. Then we look over on the right side. These are what we call unregistered nodes. These are something we have not labeled in TrueFort. That could mean this is potentially some shadow IT in the environment, something we didn't know existed. It could be a brand new server that just got spun up that we need to go out and label. Or it's simply a nefarious connection that we need to go and take further action on. But having this type of visibility allows you to understand all traffic coming in and out of your hosts, whether it be east and west throughout your network or north and south out into the internet. But this visual representation is great, but what if we want to dig into the details behind it? That's where we take this grid filter. Now in the grid, we can start to see all that network data correlated to a user and a process. So we're not just looking at network connections. We also want to know who ran what process to create that network connection. And this is now the foundation for that behavioral profile that we're going to talk about next. That behavioral profile is being leveraged in real time to draw these green lines and red lines that you're seeing represented here. We can select any of these red lines to actually understand what is this network connection that's happening in the background here. Is that an HTTP connection? We're seeing an NTP connection going on here to some public IP address. So now you get an understanding of how my environment is behaving in real time. But let's jump into a profile and understand how those work. So as we open up that same application we were just looking at, we can see that the profiles are actually broken up by role. So we have a different profile for the database and the web server. But let's open up the database's profile and give it a look. So what this profile is now telling us is from the supervised machine learning that we did on the database, here are the appropriate connections, users, and processes that TrueFort saw during that window. And what we can do is we define these, we can read them from left to right. We understand that the MySQL user ran the MySQL daemon process and had an incoming connection on TCP 3306. So it's coming into the MySQL port. Where did it come from? Well, it came from the app server for this application. If you want to look at the actual IP address, we can see that in the other column over here. But this is great because now we can start to leverage labels and classifiers to actually create policies in a more human language. So as we can see, we define all of the incoming connections, the listening and the outgoing connections. So now when we go into enforcement mode or we go into alerting mode, if one of the real-time connections does not match these criteria, we're going to automatically alert and or block that behavior. So now we can understand whether it's a service account deviating, a new process trying to create a connection, or whatever type of network connection coming in or out of the machine. We know if it's an approved behavior or not. And that is where our behavioral profile starts to drive those controls. So now that we've seen what the behavioral profile looks like, what do the alerts look like? So when we see an alert come up, the very contextual nature of TrueFort can provide us a lot of information. We don't just understand that there's a new network connection, but we can also understand what user, what process drove that network connection, what application was it coming from, or what application was it going to. And as we open up the alert, we can get a lot of details around what were all of the processes that were running at the time of the alert on that machine. Same thing goes with all of the network connections. This is a great forensic fingerprint to be able to leverage and understand what all was happening on the machine at the moment of that alert. But we've been looking at a real-time view so far of our applications. What's great is we can actually leverage TrueFort's DVR functionality to go and replay an anomaly. So if I open up our timeline slider, I can go back to a few hours ago, or I can go all the way up to a few months ago and rewind an incident that happened. So if I go back to 8:04 a.m., I understand what the application was doing, all of the connections it was making. And as I walk on a minute by minute basis, I can see how did the application change, what connections were going up and down. So now if I need to even investigate further, say I wanted to understand what's happening particularly on app server number 2, we can go a level deeper still. We can go into a process tree view where we now see every parent and child process all the way up into the network connection it created. And then I can highlight that chain. So this is great for forensic analysts to go and understand how an attack progressed. Was a user escalating their privilege throughout this chain here? And then watching how that affected the application. What was the blast radius? What connections were made? So this is a great way to visually represent that anomaly or attack. But we can also leverage our reporter to do a lot of that real-time querying I talked about before in our presentation. So whether we want to go look at high-level dashboards like alert trends, or we want to look at more detailed dashboards to look at network activity on particular ports or processes, we can start to run very complex queries to understand complex behaviors of the environment. So this is a quick example to say Show me anywhere where a database connection has happened before. In the last 24 hours, we have our time bucket. Now we can start to see what users were creating those connections. What applications were those connections happening on? We can look at everything from listening all the way to incoming and outgoing on the network, on the process, and on the identity, all correlated together for us. Another great dashboard to show off is our user dashboard. So if you're trying to understand what all the service accounts in your environment are up to, this is a great way to get a representation of who the most frequent service accounts are and understand what they're doing. So if we wanted to go and investigate a particular account, let's go check out this IIS account. We simply filter onto that account. We now know a blast radius of every application this account has interacted with. And let's go down and understand there's no listening going on here, but there are incoming and outgoing connections. And for an account that's running web servers, it's interesting to see things like port 22 being used, or port 21, or port 1433. And we can investigate any of these. So we can say, why are you making an SSH connection? Let's filter onto an outgoing SSH. And now we can see every SSH connection that they have made in the last 24 hours. So these reports are a great way for you to really dig into that telemetry that you're gathering in a more contextual fashion. But with that, that's going to wrap up the demo for us today, and we'll open it up for some more Q&A.
Yeah, Nick, really nice presentation. I love that demo, especially the DVR function. It just seems so intuitive. I mean, such a great way to to view the information the way that you would want to see it. And I also really like that dashboard with the activity of the system accounts. That was great. Um, so we do have some questions coming in here. Let's see. First one: will I need to deploy an agent or network device?
Yeah, so what's great is if you're already leveraging an EDR, one of our partners, say it be CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, or Armis, you will not need to deploy any agents. So that's great because if you're an existing CrowdStrike customer, you simply go into your app store, hit that try it now button, and we can start lighting up TrueFort within a day. So it's a very quick time to value if you already have one of those EDRs, and we want to leverage your existing investments. If you do not have one of those EDRs, then we are going to be deploying our TrueFort agent for you to get all of this capability.
Okay, excellent. Next one here, they're wondering, can TrueFort integrate with other existing tools in my environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a lot of open APIs. So whether you want to integrate with your CMDB like a ServiceNow, or you want to push alerts over to a Splunk or an Azure Sentinel, we'll work together with your team and our professional services team to actually help you build those integrations with your existing tools. So if there's really anything you want us to integrate with, we'll make it happen with you.
Okay, excellent. Sounds good. So next one is our company has too many tools, which creates alert fatigue with little to no focus on application context. Can you quickly cover again how you address that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So by us labeling all of those workloads into their respective application, we can now create very contextual alerts. So the first thing is because we're creating that allow list, we know when we get an alert, there's a true behavioral anomaly happening because we've defined all the behaviors that should occur within the application. So now when that alert goes off, you understand not just that the workload is misbehaving, let's say on a network basis, but you know what user or service account was behind that, what process they were trying to use, and what other application in the environment they were trying to interact with. So by having all of that context and by leveraging an allow list methodology, we really reduce alert fatigue because when we have an allow list, it's a one or a zero. It's either an allowed behavior or it's unauthorized behavior. So we can then represent that to you and present that to you in a more holistic format there. That's a
Excellent.
great question.
Excellent. Next one here, they're wondering, I have a hybrid environment and utilize multiple clouds and data centers. Can TrueFort accommodate this?
Of course, for us, it doesn't matter where that workload resides. All that matters is we have some kind of agent feeding us that telemetry. So we could have one application and we could have the database sitting on premise in a physical server, We could have the app server sitting in virtual machines in another data center across the country, and we could have an app load balancer sitting in Amazon. To TrueFort, that will look like a one single holistic application, even though those workloads reside in multiple different locations, multiple data centers, multiple clouds. We come with an application focus to understand what's behind my application, what workloads reside there, not where are those workloads located in a physical sense of the word. So we really want to take all those disparate systems and environments and bring them together holistically into a single view and a single platform, as we see.
Very nice. All right, great. Um, how long does it take to discover the different application and communications in my environment?
Yeah. So what's great is as soon as that agent is on the machine, if it is that EDR, it's already there, it's already collecting telemetry. It is really immediate. So all that it takes TrueFort to start showing you those maps is us to label the workloads. So as soon as that workload is labeled, you're going to be getting real-time views into what that application is doing. And even before we label it, we're still taking in that telemetry and we're still storing it. So if you needed to go into the reporter and ask a question about a particular workload that you haven't mapped or labeled yet, you still get all of the context about the users, the processes, and the identities, and the network connections, I should say, of what's going on those workloads. But what we typically see is it takes anywhere from 1 to 2 months of picking and choosing all of these different workloads and applications and then labeling them over time. We know that a lot of our customers don't have a fully accurate CMDB, so we start with whatever they have, and using that realm view, that real-time visibility that we saw, we can start to easily label and map workloads based on their network traffic, based on their users and processes that we see running. So we make it very easy for our customers to be able to label and classify those workloads. And what's great with those CMDB integrations like a ServiceNow, we can actually leverage TrueFort to push that data back into our CMDB to keep us all up to date. Because if we're going to take the effort to label and classify all these workloads, we want you to be able to take that and run with it right into your CMDB and not have to duplicate that effort. Um, but yeah, that's a great question.
Excellent, excellent. This next one, they're wondering how long does it take to complete a microsegmentation project?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what's awesome is we can break down this microsegmentation project into smaller chunks. We don't want to try and boil the ocean and segment 10,000 workloads all at once. We can break it down by application, by even individual workloads. So let's think about the journey for a single application. We're going to go through that profiling. That profiling, you usually spend about 2 weeks learning the behaviors where we compile all that data in. Then we actually prune and tune that profile. With our customers, we spend 1 or 2 hours per week pruning and tuning that profile out. So think about 3 to 4 weeks to actually hone in that profile. At the end of that, if you're ready to push, we can start to push. Some of our customers like to sit in that alerting mode for another week or two to see just what pops up. But when we think about it on an application basis, we can get into our microsegmentation within 3 months, which is very quick comparatively. So it's great to be able to have that visualization to understand what's happening. Then we get to define all that behavior based on your real life telemetry. And then we can go and monitor against that and then essentially get into our control structure. So anywhere from a 2 to 3 month span, you can get all the way down into enforcement levels and pushing your microsegmentation and being very positive about what you're about to push and confident in it.
Excellent, excellent. Um, Next question here. What are the optimal approaches TrueFort recommends for zero trust microsegmentation?
Yeah. So zero trust really is built into the platform. As we saw with that behavioral profile, we are exclusively defining allowable behaviors across the users, across the processes, across the network connections. So we start with nothing. We say that there's no allowed behavior. And we go and we learn what's out there and we allow the customer to pick and choose. If we found a behavior, we learned it that they don't approve of, they get to remove that behavior. So what it boils down to is we now have a list of everything that's allowed to happen. Anything that falls outside of that is now a blockable or an alertable behavior. We don't leverage signatures and vulnerability databases because, as we know, they have a lot of false positives, um, and they are not always as up to date. If there's a new 0-day that comes out, they're not going to be in a vulnerability database yet. But if you have an approved behavioral profile and a 0-day comes out and it breaches that behavioral allow list, we can then prevent that 0-day from happening because we have a known good state that this workload represents for us to then detect against. And that really is the fundamentals of zero trust, is creating those allow lists of known good and denying everything else. So that's fundamentally our approach to zero trust. It's really built into the product and built into that behavioral profile.
Excellent. Hey, and if people want to get started with TrueFort after all the stuff that they've heard today, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is go check out our website, truefort.com. You can start to read all those white papers and a lot of information about it. But as always, reach out to us. Put in a demo request, and somebody like me or one of my other sales engineers would be happy to actually give you a personalized demo of the platform and really answer all your fine-tuned questions. But I would push everybody truefort.com, start reading up on us, and put in one of those demo requests, and we'll be glad to kind of communicate with you guys.
All right, truefort.com. Nick, thank you so much for coming on today. Great presentation, really great demo, and thanks for all the insights here in the Q&A. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate all your time and hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.
All right, and before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing, and the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is Corey Burns from Wisconsin. Congratulations to Corey Burns. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank TrueFort for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.